Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated demands that UNIFIL temporarily leave Lebanon's combat zone.
The European Union is extending its sanctions to Iranian entities and individuals linked to Russia.
Russia could carry out an attack against NATO by the end of the decade, cautioned the head of Germany's Foreign Intelligence Agency.
Poland is accelerating efforts to strengthen the defense of its borders with Russia and Belarus. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated demands that United Nations peacekeeping forces in Lebanon, known as UNIFIL, temporarily leave the combat zone. International criticism is growing after Israeli forces have repeatedly fired on UN peacekeepers since invading Lebanon 2 weeks ago. In a video statement released on Monday, Netanyahu rejected allegations that the Israeli military deliberately targeted the peacekeepers.
The charge that Israel deliberately attacked UNIFIL personnel is completely false. It's exactly the opposite. Israel repeatedly asked UNIFIL to get out of harm's way. It repeatedly asked them to temporarily leave the combat zone, which is right next to Israel's border with Lebanon.
Stefan Dujarric, spokesperson for the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, emphasized that the attacks on its peacekeepers may constitute war crimes.
Attacks against peacekeepers are in breach of international law, including international humanitarian law, and they may constitute war crime. He called on all parties, including the IDF, to refrain from any and all actions that put our peacekeepers at risk.
The UN Security Council has reiterated its support for UNIFIL's role in supporting regional security, as well as its support for the peacekeepers' continued presence in southern Lebanon, despite Netanyahu's calls for their removal.
The European Union is extending its sanctions to 7 Iranian individuals and 7 Iranian entities linked to the shipment of missiles to Russia. Among them are several airlines, the country's deputy defense minister, and important members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Their assets will be frozen and they will be banned from entering the European Union. This was one of the decisions taken by EU chief diplomat Josep Borrell, who reiterated the European Union's disagreement on the Middle East conflict.
We should also be clear-eyed about what the Israeli leadership is doing and what looks like a full determination to pursue its military objectives at a high cost.
Borrell also announced that he wants to bring the review of the bloc's trade agreement with Israel to the next meeting of ministers. Spain and Ireland called for its suspension months ago if the country is shown to be violating human rights. But neither Madrid and Dublin's demands nor the High Representative's intentions are shared by several EU countries. Among them is the Czech Republic, who said on Monday that they are not closing the door on arms shipments to Israel.
Russia could carry out an attack against NATO by the end of the decade, cautioned the head of Germany's Foreign Intelligence Agency. Bruno Karl delivered the stark warning at a meeting attended by the country's leading espionage chiefs at the Bundestag.
Ob wir wollen oder nicht, wir stehen in einer direkten Auseinandersetzung mit Russland und die Feinderklärung hat Putin längst gegenüber uns vorgenommen.
Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov refuted the remarks, saying it is illogical for Moscow to move against the alliance. In June, Germany's Interior Minister Nancy Faeser said the country's security situation was tense. At the time, she said that Russia's war in Ukraine continues to call European peace and order into question, and that Russia, among other countries, uses intelligence services to spy on Germany.
Albania's negotiations to join the European Union have begun. According to a survey carried out in 2023, Tirana will have a strong support from its citizens during this process, with over 90% approving the European vision of the government. Albania's strong commitment to the West could be an advantage, especially as the war in Ukraine raises concerns about the EU's security.
But I have been living actually in Albania as well. It is fully aligned with the EU on all sanctions, on all matters CFSP, on common foreign and security policy, which is very important. It has been a NATO member for the longest time among the Western Balkan countries, ever since 2009.
Despite its strengths, Albania will have to undertake numerous reforms to convince the member states and adapt its legislation to European standards.
In the past, Albania has been commended for what it has been delivering on fight against corruption and organized crime. It still needs to do a lot more. It needs to deliver more as well on protecting the fundamental rights, freedom of media and freedom of expression.
Tirana submitted its application in 2009, but still has a long way to go. Once the negotiations are concluded, the European Commission will give its opinion to the European Council, where the member states will have to vote unanimously. For the procedure to be completed, the European Parliament will also have to give its approval.
President of the European Commission has endorsed return hubs outside of the European Union for rejected asylum seekers. Ursula von der Leyen sent a 7-page letter to EU leaders on Monday outlining several proposals to curb the number of asylum applications, including the controversial return hubs.
The letter is very clear on what are considered the priority areas for action, but now, of course, it is for the leaders to discuss the way forward based on the letter that the President has sent.
In the letter, von der Leyen said the EU will be able to learn lessons from the criticised Italy-Albania asylum processing deal. She previously described the offshore processing as out-of-the-box thinking, but humanitarian organisations fear it may set a dangerous precedent.
L'Italia ha dato il buon esempio con la sottoscrizione del protocollo Italia-Albania per processare in territorio albanese, ma sotto giurisdizione italiana ed europea, le richieste di asilo. È una strada nuova, coraggiosa, inedita, ma che rispecchia perfettamente lo spirito europeo.
In the letter, von der Leyen also pushed for designating safe third countries at an EU level. This would speed up deportations and avoid disagreements between member states. It comes ahead of a 2-day summit in Brussels where migration is set to dominate talks.
The first group of migrants is being transferred on board an Italian Navy ship from Italy to Albania. It's a total of 16 men. Some of them are from Bangladesh, the rest is from Egypt. And they are expected to arrive in Albania between Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning. All screening procedures are being carried out both on board the vessel and upon arrival to check whether or not these migrants meet all the necessary requirements and to see whether their asylum requests will be approved or rejected. After they have arrived at the first location in the Shëngjin port area in Albania, they will be transferred to the second center, to one of the facilities within that center, depending on their status. Both the centers and the procedures are managed by the Italian authorities as if these were Italian territories located outside national borders. We also understand that migrants will retain their right under international EU law to apply for asylum in Italy, and those asylum seekers whose applications will be approved will have to be sent to Italy. The two centers which were expected to open last May and which began operating only last week will initially accommodate a total of 400 migrants. That number could increase to 800 in the coming weeks, according to Italian officials. The agreement between Italy and Albania, which was endorsed by the EU to tackle migration, has been criticized by human rights groups and by Italy's opposition parties. They claim that the cost incurred by Italy to open and run those centers, nearing €1 billion, are too high. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Rome.
Poland is accelerating efforts to strengthen the defense of its borders with Russia and Belarus. Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced on Monday that construction of the so-called East Shield project will begin earlier than planned, by the end of this year instead of next. This project will increase military fortifications and other defense measures on Poland's eastern border over a length of approximately 800 kilometers. Construction is expected to last 4 years. Tusk was present at a training ground on Monday where the first exercises took place in testing elements of the project's new infrastructure and emphasized that it is part of a combined effort with the Baltic states and Finland.
Cieszę się, że tarcza wschód rusza tak na serio. Jest to wspólne przedsięwzięcie nie tylko polskie, ponieważ ono jest połączone także z wysiłkiem państw bałtyckich, jeśli chodzi o bałtycką linię obrony, Finlandia.
Tusk also said that he is to discuss European funding for the project in Brussels in the near future.
The European Union is to toughen its air pollution limits, bringing them closer to what is recommended by the World Health Organization. Environment ministers signed off the stricter limits at the Environment Council in Luxembourg. But some countries expressed their reservations about meeting the deadlines. Malta, for example, claims it would be impossible for it to meet the new limit on nitrogen dioxide, and Germany welcomed a clause that allows governments to postpone the deadline until 2040. They also sought reassurance from the European Commission that it will not be forced to restrict car driving or close industrial plants.